Welcome, Ramesh. And I'm going to give you
thank you.
Yeah.
It's nice to be here. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to use some a PowerPoint presentation. But before we do that, let me just say a little bit about why I'm talking about these things. About 15, 16 years ago, I had a chronic illness. After being a vegetarian since I was 19, I'm 67 now. So a long time being a vegetarian, following a sattvic diet, practicing meditation, asanas, fasting, and so on and so forth. But I still got sick. I gained a bit of weight and developed a chronic illness. And long story short, there is a few things in Baba's philosophy or Baba's ideas that I didn't really understand. And I think many Margis don't understand. Many people don't understand. And if there are people who are not familiar with who Baba is here, I'm referring to Sri Sri Anandamurti, the guru of Ananda Marga. And he's mentioning two very important aspects, and that is, one is alkaline food and green foods. Chlorophyll, Anandamurti is using this term chlorophyll-rich foods, and he uses another term, food for the brain. And so I definitely didn't follow that, and it took me a while to understand it. And the way that I understood it was through doing a long juice fast that cured my, up until then, incurable chronic illness, because I had tried so many different things, from regular medical treatments to all kinds of alternative treatments and herbs, but nothing really worked until I did a long fast and a long cleanse and became alkaline. And so that's part of what I'm going to try to explain. And then the other thing about this alkaline food is that it is the most nutrient-dense food as well. And this is something I learned later on. So scientifically, what Baba or Anandamurti was saying holds true. Spiritually, it holds true. And also environmentally. Very, very important, even though in Anandamurti's writings, you may not see this very clearly or articulate it the way that I articulate it now. But if you look at everything he has written in different books and discourses and so on, all of this makes sense. So what I'm saying is, it's not enough to be a vegetarian or a vegan. We need to be healthy vegans and vegetarians. And that food is also healthy for the planet, the most healthy food for the planet as well. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and start. Let's see here. Can you see that?
I'm seeing just a white square.
We're seeing just a white clear. Okay, let's see. Can you see it now?
No, it's the same for me.
Okay, let's see. Let's try again. What about now?
Ah, there we go. Now I'm seeing the
Okay.
whole presentation. You're just not in presentation mode.
Yeah. I don't know why it's not.
That is unusual. Well,
Yeah.
it's large enough to see. And while I'm thinking of it, would it be possible to share these slides for people to review later?
Yeah, sure. I can do that. It's funny that it doesn't change. Okay. Well, if you can see it, then that's okay. So presentation, as I said, is about the relationship between the body, mind, and the planet, and in terms of nutrition and food. And so one thing that I discovered some time after I was able to heal myself with the help of the work that Dada Dharma Vedananda has done and his center in the Philippines, and now that has become an important center in Anandanagar as well, where people are coming from all over India to get treatments. And that is that this food or this lifestyle is a lifestyle that has been used by many people throughout the ages. I am from Norway, which is a very cold climate, where people are used to eating meat and fish and so on. And I always wondered, why is it natural to be a vegetarian? And then after some years, I discovered that the reason for that is that most people throughout evolutionary time has lived in very warm climates where fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds were plentiful. And the people living in cold areas were outliers in terms of human evolution. They are aberrations, not the way that most people used to live. So that's another indication that we are naturally vegetarians or vegans. So who are some of these people? So people live longer today. That is true because of cleanliness and so on, and in some ways better healthcare. But we're dying of cultural diseases such as diabetes, cancer, and heart disease, which is directly related to the food that we eat: animal protein, sugar, refined carbohydrates. And milk products are part of animal protein. So when we eat, which I used to do, which is part of the Norwegian diet, a lot of yogurt, milk products, cheese, and so on. And then you add sugar and refined carbohydrates on top of that, then you can, as I was, become an unhealthy vegetarian very easily. And there are examples of that. I think that we probably know people like that in our community that may be thinking that they're eating a healthy diet, but are not. So who are some of the people that have actually lived very healthy that we know today? And you may have heard of this term, the blue zones. It's a relatively new term, and it comes from the study of about 12 different people living in different pockets around the world, in the Mediterranean, pockets in Italy, a couple of places in Italy, the Hansas, which are in today's Pakistan, small community of about 50, 60,000 people, Vilcabamba Indians in South America, the Athabascans in Russia, in the Caucasus Mountains, the island on Okinawa, and the Loma Linda Seventh-day Adventists in California. So these people have been studied quite extensively, and what they found is that their diet is primarily vegetarian. The Okinawans have the highest consumption of meat in the form of fish, about 16% of their diet. But the rest of them eat meat and fish very sparingly. So what is the secret here? Well, there's a few secrets. One is the intake of fruits and vegetables is very, very high, and nuts and seeds. And another thing, some kind of fermented food, which is another thing that Baba talks about, the importance of fermented food, like in the form of yogurt or sauerkraut, some kind of fermentation because these foods are probiotics. We need prebiotics because the prebiotics are food for the probiotics. But if we don't have the probiotic bacteria in our digestive system, it is difficult to develop good digestion. So these are some of the secrets to these people. Their calorie intake is also relatively low, about 1,800 calories, compared to Americans who consume 3,000 plus calories today. And often these calories from very low nutrition, refined carbohydrates, sugar, meat products, and so on and so forth. So those are some of the secrets. And so we are going to get into that a little bit. Why is plant-based food the best? Because, as I said earlier, we are mainly herbivores. Our digestive system is more like the digestive system of a monkey rather than a wolf or a tiger. The carnivores, they have a short intestinal tract so that the meat can be digested quickly because it has no fiber and then be released rather quickly, whereas ours is much longer. The acidity in the stomach of a carnivore is very high, about 20 times stronger acid than us, so that they can digest that heavy food more quickly. So we need easy to digest food, and the easiest to digest food is basically also what is alkaline food. And this is a very interesting thing. Baba doesn't go into this in detail, but all of the keys are there. So what is alkaline food? The most alkaline foods are fruits and vegetables, and especially green vegetables, which again relates to what Anandamurti talks about when he mentions alkaline and chlorophyll-rich foods. And he says the chlorophyll-rich food is food for the brain. We know that one of the main reasons today for Alzheimer's disease is inflammation. Inflammation in the body, inflammation in the brain. And alkaline food reduces inflammation. In fact, I had inflammation. I was suffering from the inflammation of the prostate gland, which meant that I had inflammation in other parts of the body as well. What cured me was alkaline food through fasting, about 2 weeks of juice fasting, and then another few days of eating just alkaline foods. I was completely cured. So the point I'm trying to make is that these foods should be the primary food of vegetarians and vegans, not pizza, refined carbohydrates in the form of the flour, and then cheese in forms, which gives us fat and protein, but rather plants, and also having most of our plant proteins from things like nuts, seeds, legumes, beans, tofu, and so on and so forth. There's plenty of these types of nutrients in the plant kingdom. So first I was able to understand the importance of alkaline food. Then through the work of Dr. Joel Fuhrman, I realized that these green foods have also the highest percentage of micronutrients. Kale and collard greens, he has developed scale from 1,000 to 0, and kale and collard greens and a few other greens are at 1,000, whereas Coca-Cola and sugar and cheese and so on are at the very bottom of that pyramid. So then we understand then the importance of these foods. Alkaline foods are also the most nutrient dense, and that's why Fuhrman calls his food nutritarian, in other words. And I actually asked him personally one time, because we hosted him here at the Prama Wellness Center for a lecture and a workshop. And I asked him directly, I said, your food system is alkaline, isn't it? And he said, of course it is. So even though he doesn't use that term, and I asked him about that too, and he said, because it's controversial, it's people misunderstand. There are all kinds of wild ways of explaining what alkaline food is and so on. But basically, the best and easiest term to use is that alkaline food is the most easy to digest foods. And then what are those foods? Fruits and vegetables. So that should be the basis of our food, if we think of a food pyramid. So these types of foods support these three very important physical systems: the digestive system, the glandular endocrine system, and the lymphatic system. And we know also that this fits very well into a yogic lifestyle, because the way that Anandamurti presents yoga, for example, is not as a sort of fast-moving fitness system like Ashtanga yoga, but rather a slow form of yoga that supports the endocrine and lymphatic system. And then on top of that, when you have food that also balances the endocrine and lymphatic system, then you have a good yogic system. As an example, a young woman who had Hashimoto's disease or hypothyroidism came to me once. She had a very bad diet, lots of sweets and cookies and so on. And she was on medication. But through a combination of fasting, eating a new diet, alkaline diet, nutrient-rich diet, and practicing shoulder stand and fish, within 1 year, she was able to get off the medication. So I'm just using it as an example of what can be done health-wise when we combine yoga, meditation, and a healthy type of food that is nutrient-dense and alkaline at the same time. So the lymphatic system helps cleanse the blood. The endocrine system produces hormones that are used by the organs and the nervous system and the brain and so on. But the basis of all this is the digestive system. So we need to have a good digestion that then can support the endocrine system, because a lot of hormones are actually produced through the digestive system, that then again supports the good lymphatic system, so that the blood is cleansed and properly and so on. And all of these, as it says here, are affected by food, herbs, exercise, and the stress level. If we are very stressed, then that again affects digestion, it affects the glandular system, and so on and so forth. So thinking of this in terms of it, physical, psychic ecology, we can understand how these systems are very interactive and very important to keep in a healthy state. So we can, in a sense, create what Furman calls superimmunity. Science has proven that we can protect ourselves from nearly everything, from the common cold to cancer. We need to apply this knowledge in our life. So this is maybe too broad and too strong of a statement, because sometimes we can do all the best we can and still get sick, still get cancer, for example. And cancer is one of those complicated diseases, because I think that some cancers are from chemicals in the environment, for example, and so on and so forth. So we need to take, these statements with a little bit of grain of salt. And the other thing is, there may be karmic, genetic reasons for certain diseases as well. So, and I'm not here to say that it can solve anything. And for sure, if you have a car accident and you break bones, you can't cure that with fasting, of course. you need other medical systems. So, and speaking of cancer, there are now different studies showing that fasting and chemotherapy work well together, for example. So these systems can be applied in supportive ways. So why did we get into this state of affairs with so many treatable, preventable diseases? Primarily because of the SAD diet, the standard American diet, refined carbohydrates, sugar, animal fats, and refined oils, dairy, and different dairy products. You know, the government supports the dairy, meat, and egg industry with heavy subsidies. And that is one of the reasons why so much of the American diet and the Western diet in general, it's not just in America, it's in Europe as well. 60% of the calories come from these ingredients. And this is truly a Western problem. And now, unfortunately, we are exporting that diet to the East, to the world where people are primarily vegetarians. The China study by Dr. Colin Campbell showed that when people moved from a primarily vegetarian diet in China over a 15-year period in 3 different urban areas, there was a 75% increase in cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. Direct correlation with the change in diet. So there are 2 nutrients that we need to think about, and especially as we get older, we especially need to think about these and have them in abundance in our diet, and that is antioxidants and what they call nutrient density or micronutrients, which we get from green vegetables. So antioxidants are very high in fruits, beans, and green vegetables. There is something called an ORAC score, and you can look that up. You can Google it. And the ORAC score basically indicates the different antioxidant levels in foods. And there are certain herbs that are extremely high in antioxidants, and primarily Indian herbs like turmeric, like cloves, pepper, black pepper. Some of the Indian herbs that are used in Ayurvedic cooking or generally in Indian food are extremely high in these antioxidants. Cloves has 346,000 ORACs compared to blueberries, which has about 12,000 wild blueberries. Of course, you can't eat a lot of cloves at the time, but if we, as they do in Indian cooking, have these things in the food on a regular basis, you are going to consume a lot of these antioxidants. For example, in chai, if you're making chai, which I usually do in the wintertime, using all of these herbs in chai, then you are on a daily basis getting a rich intake of these antioxidants. So these are just some simple practices that we can use to increase our intake of these nutrients. Beans as well, lentils, all kinds of legumes are also high in antioxidants. And the most nutrient-dense foods is in this category. Bok choy, cabbage, peppers of all colors, broccoli, Swiss chard. I mentioned kale and collard greens. These have the highest nutrient density. So what we want to do on a daily basis is to combine these 2 foods, antioxidants and the green vegetables. Then we get a good supply of nutrients, and at the same time, our diet will be alkaline. So we need macronutrients and we need micronutrients. Macronutrients are fats, carbohydrates, and protein and water. Micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, and enzymes. Phytochemicals is sort of the new frontier in nutritional science. There are thousands of phytochemicals. Chia seeds has 50, 60 different phytochemicals. That's why they're calling it a superfood. But kale, salad greens that you can grow in your backyard are even more filled with phytochemicals. So we don't need to travel the world to find these phytochemicals. They are in our green vegetables as well. So antioxidants, nutrient density, and a balance of macronutrients and micronutrients every day. And the macronutrients need to come from plants, the fats from avocado, from nuts and seeds, carbohydrates from whole grains and vegetables, and protein from legumes and so on, and also from beans and from nuts and seeds. Between 1935 and 2005, cancer rates increased every single year because of this change in diet. In Norway, where I come from, during the Second World War, people were primarily vegetarians, and heart disease and cancer rate and diabetes went down dramatically during these 5 years during the Second World War, again indicating the direct correlation between diet and these diseases. So here is Dr. Joel Fuhrman's food pyramid. Now, as you can see, it's not fully vegetarian or vegan because he's, catering to the general population. But the point is that vegetables are at the bottom of the pyramid, and then fruits, and then beans and legumes. So in other words, again, he is promoting an alkaline diet, nutrient-rich diet, and then you have whole grains, raw nuts and seeds in the third level, and then fish or fat-free dairy, then poultry and eggs and oils, and then beef, sweets, cheese, and so on at the top of the pyramid. So you can equally create a vegan or vegetarian pyramid like that. But the main point I wanted to show is the importance of these fruits and vegetables at the bottom as the basis of our diet. Michael Pollan, the food writer, has a saying that we need to eat whole foods, mainly plants, not too much. And that pretty much sums up this philosophy. He also said, this joke is probably only understood by Americans. He says, eat plants, but not food made in a plant. It's a American insider joke. And also, fill up your gas at the gas station, but don't buy your food at the gas station. He has a book called 52 Food Rules, where he has these one-liners that can be very instructive. So here again are some of these foods that Fuhrman especially promotes. He uses garlic and mushrooms as a health food. For yogis, of course, we know that that's not consumed because it's not good for meditation, but they have certain health qualities. So greens, beans, fruits, berries, nuts and seeds, mushrooms, and he also mentioned garlic as foods that we should eat in significant quantity. These anti-cancer foods are also coming from the same green food group. And one interesting thing they have found through studies is that when you're mixing these foods, broccoli and collard greens and kale and so on, in a blender, you make a smoothie. So I sometimes make a smoothie out of fruits and nuts and seeds and these greens. The cancer-fighting quality increases by breaking down the cell wall in these food groups. So that's a very interesting thing that they found. Benefits of cruciferous vegetables: prevents abnormal angiogenic genesis, in other words, the cancer cells from growing, prevents fat cells from expanding, prevents inflammation, inhibits the development of cancer cells. So these foods are especially good if you fast on these foods when you are post-treatment from cancer, or even during cancer treatment. They can be very, very helpful with conventional treatments. Here are some other anti-angiogenic foods: berries, cinnamon. Cinnamon, of course, also is used a lot in Indian cooking. So here you have another spice that regulates the blood sugar, and it's also very high in antioxidants. Citrus, cruciferous vegetables, ginger, again, Indian cooking, grapes, omega-3 fats, and spinach. The best source of omega-3 fats is probably from different seeds, and especially flax seeds. Ground flax seeds, because when you consume it ground, you are getting be able to absorb the nutrients, whereas whole, they will just pass through the body mostly. I mentioned this in the beginning, the importance of probiotic and prebiotic foods. Probiotic supplements are especially important in diet if it is poor or if you have taken antibiotics. Many of us have taken that over the years, and that tends to destroy the good and the bad bacteria in our digestive system. Best sources of probiotics are fermented foods, kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, kefir, also from plant sources such as cashew yogurt, coconut yogurt, soy yogurt, and so on. Prebiotics, indigestible fibers, that is food source for the probiotics. Leeks, Jerusalem artichoke, dandelion greens, chicory, asparagus, but it also is found in the skin of most vegetables. So better to cook or use the vegetables with the skin on, because the prebiotics are needed to feed the probiotics. So they work in cooperation, coordinated cooperation, as we know it. So juice fasting, as I mentioned in the beginning, and intermittent fasting are incredibly powerful. And Dr. Walter Longo, who has studied not so much juice fasting, but a very low-calorie diet, has found that the 72-hour fast on about 600 calories per day resets the immune system. There's another thing with fasting that I should mention, something called autophagy or autophagy, which is the self-eating cell. That's the literal translation of autophagy, meaning that the cell cleanses itself during the fasting period. It is literally eating its own garbage, so to speak, living off of it or expelling it as a toxin so that they can absorb new nutrients. This process starts generally in the afternoon of a fast and becomes exponentially more powerful as we go into the fast. So when you do a 3-day fast, you're speeding up that process. But the longer you fast, if you have a chronic illness, like I had, or heart disease, cancer, and so on, then you're literally ending up with a new cellular structure in your body. Not 100% literally, because some cells live longer than 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and so on. But many of the cells in the body will literally be renewed. And that's one of the powers of long-term fasting. And so what I generally recommend, and of course this is part of the Ananda Marga system, to fast 2 to 4 days per month, and then do some longer fast in the spring and in the fall. And this is also in Ayurveda often recommended, that between the seasons that we do a cleanse, like in Ayurveda, they do panchakarma. But in general, regular fasting, but then also have a good diet in addition to that. So that was the basic presentation on the food, on food and our health. So I want to now move to this idea of the relationship between food and the planet, the health of the planet. And as we look at the whole body, the human body as an ecological system, we know, of course, that the planet is an ecological system. But unfortunately, as we have treated the body in negative ways, we have also treated the planet in similar ways. And a lot of this has to do with our diet, with the way that we look on diet and the way that we consume our diet. So what is the worldview of Anandamurti or P.R. Sarkar? Well, it is based on Tantra, on yoga, and on neo-humanism, which is a philosophy that he developed from the spirituality of Tantra and yoga. And then from that, an economic system called PROUD, Progressive Utilization Theory. These three systems, just like the body, the digestive system, the endocrine system, and the lymphatic system, are systems that function in an ecological fashion. In other words, PROUD is based on neo-humanism, which is again based on a spiritual outlook from yoga or Tantra. So humanism, Western humanism, has many positive aspects, and we can call that the Western Enlightenment, and neo-humanism is the kind of Eastern Enlightenment. We really need to blend these two worldviews, and I think that PROUD is an example of that as an economic system. Neo-humanism means love for all beings, even inanimate objects. So in other words, in a neo-humanist society, we would take into account that rivers, that mountains are sentient beings, that they have life, and they need to be protected. So in other words, if oil is found in an area that is important to preserve, the preservation of nature will take precedent over the profit of just exploring the oil and so on. These are issues that are hotly debated now because we are in a planetary crisis, but have never been taken into account. And that is, of course, why we are in this planetary crisis. Just like with our own food, we were eating foods that were not healthy for us, and so we got into trouble. So as Ken Wilber used to say, we need to consume carrots rather than cows. Food that, and also, in other words, food that is low on the food chain and food that is local. This is pure neo-humanism and PROUD. PROUD is very much centered on local economics, building up the economy from the local level. And again, you see then this very deep ecological vision in PROUD from the basis of neo-humanism, that every being, every entity has existential right. In other words, our economy is based on that. That is completely contrary to the way capitalism functions, because capitalism looks upon nature as a given right to take, to use, whereas PROUD or neo-humanism has completely the opposite view, that nature has a right to exist, and therefore we need to be very careful in how we utilize nature. So many ecologists are saying, and I believe that that is very true, that we are nearing a state of ecological collapse. Global warming, pollution, resource depletion, species extinction. 60% of animals have been reduced in the last 50 years. I mean, an enormous amount. Partly because of fossil fuel use, more pollution, more energy and money to produce force us into more localized structure. So what fossil fuel use has enabled us is to expand at a tremendous rate, because we had all this relatively free energy, but because it was utilized within the capitalist system that had no ecological worldview, had no ecological principles that it was based on, we basically ended up polluting the planet that we live on, and today we see the effects of that. You know, plastic, for example, it was invented in the mid-60s in Sweden, my neighbor country. And I remember the day when I went to the store and they said, "Oh, you don't need to bring that bag anymore. Here's a plastic bag. We now have plastic bags." I remember that day. And now plastic bags are everywhere. As a matter of fact, plastic is so ubiquitous that we have microplastics in all of the oceans. At the deepest level of the oceans, there are microplastics in the organisms. So this is how we have treated our planet. And that is not the way to do it. And it is certainly not the way way to live in order for us to live in harmony, or in dynamic harmony, as Anandamurti would call it, prama, with the planet. We need to change our worldview. And that's why we need ideas like neo-humanism and Prout. So why are we in this system of collapse, ecological collapse, and maybe also economic collapse? Concentration of wealth in the hands of the elite, coupled with dwindling resources, leads to collapse. And this is, again, what we're seeing. Corporations used to be taxed at a high rate only 50 years ago. Today, they're hardly paying any tax. So we see where the priorities are. Priorities are moving more and more towards the rich, which indicates more and more imbalance. And the more the imbalanced the economic system becomes, the more and more imbalance we are treating people and the environment as well. Inequality is increasing. Extraction of resources is also increasing. The ultra-rich now own more than 60% of the global population. 2,153 ultra-rich people own more than 60% of the global population owns. Just a small club of super rich people are basically controlling everything. So we need to change this. And then, of course, as I mentioned, this is what Prout stands for. We need to have an economic system that has a much lower environmental footprint. And that is really the basis of Prout. And that means local food production, local production of industry, and so on and so forth. We need to choose food with the least transportation miles. Air transported avocados and asparagus produce more CO2 than local meat. So on an environmental level, and that's why, you know, many people are moving towards eating local meat and so on. So environmentally, eating avocado may not be that healthy, even though it's healthy for the body. So these are some of the contradictions we see today because of our global food system. Meat production versus plant production. Meat production uses more water, fossil fuel, artificial fertilizer, and pesticides to produce than plant food. Livestock produce as much as 80% of all food-related emissions. So that in itself is one of the reasons why so many people now are talking about the need to move towards more plant foods. But of course, as we have talked about, it also has many important health benefits as well. Meat-based diet and nitrogen pollution. Plants used to feed livestock uses large amount of nitrogen fertilizer. A vegetarian diet could prevent 4.5 billion kilo of nitrogen from being discharged into US waterways, a number far greater than the nitrogen currently rushing through the Mississippi en route to the Gulf of Mexico. Currently, there is a huge dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico due to nitrogen pollution. This is a huge problem. There are NASA photos of the planet where you see this nitrogen pollution happening in China, in Europe, in other Asian countries, South America, and so on. It is a huge problem. It is a problem that we often don't see because we don't have that kind of a bird's eye view. But it is happening, and this is just one example. Similarly, there are dead zones in the oceans, and so on and so forth. Meat production and the impact on water, air, land, and oceans. Water, 2,400 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef. 1 pound of tofu only requires 244 gallons of water. Pollution runoff from factory farms and livestock grazing is one of the leading causes of pollution in our rivers and lakes. Land use, 10 pounds of grain will produce just 1 pound of meat. In the US, 56 million acres of land are used to grow feed for animals, while only 4 million acres are producing plants for humans. More than 90% of all Amazon rainforest is cleared since 1970s, used for grazing livestock. In Norway, there's a ship coming from Brazil once a month with food made or grown in the Amazon rainforest to feed Norwegian chicken and pigs. That's, I mean, just think about that picture. The oceans, coastal fish farms release feces, antibiotics, parasites, and non-native fish into sensitive marine ecosystem. It takes up to 3 pounds of fish meal to produce every pound of farmed salmon. So the salmon that people are buying in Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and other places is farmed. A lot of that comes from Norway, by the way. But it is tremendously destructive to the environment. So just a couple of more slides and we'll wrap it up. So what is the key to balance all of this? One can lead a healthy and long life on a vegetarian, vegan, and omnivore diet, provided nutrient-dense and antioxidant plants form the bulk of that diet. Food production must be as plant-based and local as possible to reduce pollution, use of water and energy, and so on. In some areas, meat and milk production is more practical and environmentally friendly than plant food production. This is, of course, something that also Anandamurti wrote about, this need for balance, that in some areas of the planet, it is unlikely that people will become vegetarian at this point in history because of the environment and so on and so forth. So we have to find balance in all of this. But for the most part, in probably 80-90% of the planet, people can primarily be vegetarians or vegans. So How do we do this? We need to create economic policies for localized food production. We need to restructure the economy to become, in the Proud system, we have a three-tier structure with key industries run by the government, infrastructure, and the internet, and so on and so forth. Now we have, big discussions about AI. The AI and the internet and so on needs to be non-profit and commercial free, according to Proud, so that it can be controlled through ethical principles. And this is a huge problem today. And of course, AI through capitalism is going to run amok and create a lot more problems. So key industries run by the government, and then most of the corporations would be turned into cooperatives owned by the workers, run and owned by the workers. And then there will be small capitalist manufacturing and so on, restaurant industry and so on a small level, so that capitalism cannot become like it is today, controlled and owned by a few rich people. And all of this has to happen within a decentralized system of economics, localized. We need economic democracy. Actually, Michael Moore wrote an article recently. He said, without economic democracy, there is no political democracy. And this is one of the key points in Proud, that in order to have democracy, you need both. You cannot just have political democracy run by money and advertising and pretty much co-opted by the corporations. You need economic democracy. And finally, local self-sufficiency. In other words, that the main production is to satisfy local needs. So if every locality is built around local self-sufficiency, you have less use of or abuse of nature, less abuse of resources, and so on and so forth. So this is just a very short and brief summary of how Proud would deal some of these things. But as we can simply sum up all of this, would be to say that one of the most political and revolutionary acts we can do in terms of food is simply to be a vegetarian, because we are using much less resources, and at the same time we are feeding ourselves in a healthy way, and also the planet, dealing with the planet in a much more healthy way as well. So that's my news from Lake Wobegon, as the Garrison Keillor would say it.
Thank you, Ramesh. Fantastic presentation, so much information. I'd like to open it up to some questions if people have questions.
So I'll close down the sharing, and then we can see each other. Yeah.
I do have a question for you, actually. You talked about the juice fasting, and not all of us have access, because we are global, have access to, something like the Prama Institute. Is there somewhere, a good resource where we could learn more about juice fasting? Yeah, there are lots of books, but it's fairly easy. I can probably within a few minutes give a quick rundown on how to do it. So most of us know how to do a dry fast. You don't drink water and you don't eat anything. So that's the normal fasting in Ananda Marga. And then we have lemon water fast, which is the second easiest fast. You can drink lemon water. But if you want to do a fast longer than one day, I would advise juice fasting. And it is especially advisable if you want to lose weight or you have some chronic issue. The basic formula is that during a given day, you want to consume 70 to 80% vegetable juice and about 30% fruit juice, or 30 to 40%. So that's number one. In other words, you're consuming more vegetables than fruits. One of the big criticisms by doctors is that, oh, you're juice fasting, you're consuming too much sugar. Well, that's if you only drink pineapple juice, that's true. But so that's why that's one of the reasons, but also in terms of nutrients, you're getting the nutrient density from those vegetables. That's number one. You would fast as you're eating, drinking a morning juice, lunch juice, and an evening juice. So at least 3 times a day. And then in between, you drink lots of water and tea, like herbal teas, not caffeine tea, but non-caffeinated teas, which would count as water because you need to hydrate. And the third thing is, if you're doing more than 2 days of fasting, you need to do an enema during those days you're fasting in order to have the maximum benefit of the fast. Because if you're not, you're often going to end up with a kind of toxin stored in the colon, and you may have headaches, you may feel nauseous. So you need to release those toxins, because when you do longer than 1 day of juice fast or fasting in general, you're going to expel tremendous amount of toxins, and those need to come out. And so a daily enema is very, very important. So that's basically it. And as far as length, you fast as long as you need to in order to heal. There have been I have had people fasting for up to 40 days. One woman was scheduled for knee surgery, and she was running a 5 mile towards the end of that fast. She could hardly walk in the beginning because she was primarily inflamed around the knee. She actually didn't need an operation. So it's fairly safe if you're consuming enough juice, but I would say about 2 to 3 liters of juice per day. Then it is very safe, and if you're doing the enema on a regular basis as well. And like I've seen very skinny people having certain diseases like inflammation, heart disease, and so on, also do well. Because if you're very thin, you have nothing to lose basically, and you're still consuming a lot of nutrients. So and then again, when you stop fasting, you will gain back the weight anyway. So there's nothing really to worry about.
Excellent presentation. Can you share this presentation? Can we have it on the YouTube, or can we have this presentation to pass on to others?
Yes, so we'll definitely post this on YouTube.
Okay.
Absolutely. And we have a question from
Elda.
Elda, yes.
To get to. She has actually
una pregunta cortita quiero hacer. Buenos días, buen día, buen día. Sí, dentro de la alimentación ayurveda está pita, vata, kapha.
So she's asking about how do those 3 elements of Ayurveda relate to metabolism. I think you said with potassium and magnesium. And is Tantra related to chakras? So there's it's rather a large question, I think, but see what you could do.
Yeah.
Tantra creo que es más fácil. Tantra creo que es solamente relación con los chakras. Eso quería saber, ¿sí o no? Tantra, relación más con los chakras. Digamos, un yoga tántrico es más activar o ralentizar o calmar a un chakra que es demasiado activo y otro que está demasiado perturbado, también calmarlo. Eso sería el tantra con los asanas. Eso sería más cortito, ¿verdad? Y después la pregunta de los ayurveda con el metabolismo. Vita, pata, kapha.
So two questions she had.
Yeah.
One question was, she's asking if Tantra is just related with chakras, means to, let's say, balance the chakras with asanas. Is that what Tantra is? That was her question.
Yeah, but she also asked something about Vata, Pitta, and Kapha.
Then she asked
fasting.
about the metabolism of
Yeah.
Vata,
Yeah.
Kapha. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, let's take the metabolism because I think that's the most important question. So, Vata, and again, if you don't know of these terms, there are body types in Ayurveda. A Vata person is relatively thin and tall, or short and thin. A Kapha, on the other hand, is bigger muscles, can be tall or can be short or medium height. A Pitta is medium size, medium muscles. So that's sort of the body types. The Vata metabolism is up and down. It is irregular. Pitta metabolism is very strong. Kapha metabolism is relatively slow. I am Pitta Kapha, but tends to have Kapha imbalances. That's why I gained weight. And so my metabolism is sort of, tends to be slower. So when it comes to fasting can aggravate Vata. On a mental level, that can mean less sleep and to feel cold. So for example, if you're fasting in a cold climate and you're Vata, that can be some problems. And so then you need to consume everything warm. Warm juice, not hot, but warm. And then you want to add ginger and pepper to the juices because they're warming and they will increase your metabolism. So this is how you would fast in terms of Ayurveda. And these are very helpful advices. Similarly, if you want to lose weight and you have a slow metabolism like a Kapha, you also want to add spices to the juice like turmeric, ginger, and black pepper because they will increase metabolism. If you're a Pitta, you generally don't need to worry because you have a strong metabolism. But if it's cold, like in the wintertime, the main importance during fasting is that you consume everything warm. And in this way, you balance your metabolism. In very hot climate in the summertime, it can be, it doesn't really matter so much, but you never want to consume juices extremely cold or straight out of the freezer. Something like you make blend something straight out of the freezer, you should never do, according to Ayurveda, because it slows down the fire, the Agni, and the metabolism. In classical Ayurveda, there's juicing is not so much practiced. They do other types of fasting. So you may hear certain Ayurvedic doctors be very critical of juicing, but it can be done according to Ayurvedic principles.
We have another question. Oh, and we have a hand raised and we have another question in the chat. So let's go with the hand raised first. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Ramesh, do you recommend cooking greens or eating them raw? Because I was told cooking changes something in the greens and it's better for them to be consumed raw.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Again, it depends a little bit on the time of the year. In the wintertime, I would consume it mostly cooked. There may be some diminishment of the nutrients, but not very much. So in general, in the wintertime, if you have a salad, let's say you're making kale salad, you're massaging the kale, with some oil and lemon juice. That's one way to make a raw kale salad. Then if it's wintertime, I would have that with something warm, like a warm soup. or you mix warm vegetables in that raw salad. In this way, you are also eating according to Ayurvedic principles. In the summertime, raw food is generally fine. A Vata person will do better with cooked food and soups rather than, so a thin person do better consuming more cooked foods, according to Ayurveda.
Oh, okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks.
We have a question in the chat. I asked for a 2-year-old girl baby. Is there any danger for her future health to give her a lot of soy food instead of cow milk?
Yeah, is she asking about soy milk or
She just says soy food instead of
soy
cow.
food?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with soy food. It's always better to consume like soybeans rather than just tofu, because tofu is refined. But you know, whether it's tofu or the beans or yeah, you know, the Japanese and the Chinese have lived on soybeans, you know, for thousands of years and haven't had any problems. The main issue with soy actually came from an article written in, I think, in the 60s that actually promoted something. It became a kind of a internet conspiracy. That's the way that Dr. Furman presented it. So I don't see any huge problems with soy.
Yeah, and Jaya Krishna said should stay away from non-GMO soy, though correct.
Yeah. That I would agree with. GMO foods. I think the gluten issue is partly from GMOs and Roundup. The fact that there's so much problem with gluten, and also because they have increased the amount of gluten in wheat, in the American wheat. Because whereas in Europe it's less of a problem because they don't allow GMOs, and yeah.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you for a great, wonderful presentation. So much information for all of us, but I think really, really beneficial.
Probably have an hour of questions.
Yeah, so I appreciate your
I've
time
got several.
today. Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, you brought so much to the, so much to think about.
Well,
Yeah, so much on
I
our own
hope it's not too
nutrition.
much.
Yeah. No, I mean positively. I think really, you know, for our
Okay.
diet and then things that our diet and our choices that we're making as individuals impacts the planet and how we can collectively work together to bring change. And so I think it's really really important to know.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, and I it's good because I think there is some positive change occurring, but like you said, when I was that image of the ship coming in from Brazil into Norway once a month with animal feed is just so hard to
I know.
really to digest. But I know it happens. So
yeah,
and that's you know just one example, and the avocados that we eat come from very suspect areas in Mexico where people are fighting for water, and then you have literally mafia running the business.
yeah.
That's where the most of the avocados come from. It's so, you know, when you hone in on some of these issues, it becomes very troublesome.
Yeah, and I think if it's possible is to eat local as much as you can too, or and if you can grow some of your own food. Obviously,
Yeah,
there's always limitations, but yeah.
That's absolutely the best. Yeah.
So, well, thank you again for being here. And yes, if you could please send me the PowerPoint presentation so I could share that, that would be great.
Yeah.
And I will definitely, this will be up on YouTube. And we will post it also in the community. So thank you, Ramesh.
Thank you, Elda, for showing your cactus.
So thank you. And
Very good.
before we leave, I just wanted to share, give you guys a few announcements before we say our goodbye. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right. So just so everybody, thank you again for being here. It's really wonderful to have such a community here at Our Lives. And talking about community, just I think some of you guys are part of our community. And if you're not, we hope that you will come join our community. So it's active and online. It's a great place. We have groups in Spanish. We have courses, free yoga classes, and we're constantly posting things and about new topics, inspiring quotes about upcoming events. So again, if you haven't joined or if you haven't come and visited in a while, please come check it out. We're there 7 days a week. So, and then also we do have a premium membership available. And with this premium membership, you get access to all of our on-demand courses, and that includes the 99 days course. So if you haven't taken the 99 days course, it's an all-comprehensive course about yoga lifestyle, yoga philosophy, and it's a great place to go a little deeper and learn. And it is, again, it's a part of the premium membership, of course, with some other, and then we will be introducing some new content soon. And those that are part of our premium membership will have access to it first. And lastly, we also have a new webinar. And the next webinar is on June 13th. And it's completely free. And it's an opportunity to interact live with Dada Rajananda. And we're talking about different yoga lifestyle topics, different topics about living with purpose, things about meditation. And the great thing too is you can suggest a topic. So again, all this stuff is in our community too, and it's all the links and events have been in our newsletter. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us at support@planetaryleadershiptraining. And all right. And on that note, I just want to thank you guys all for being here. And it's always a pleasure to see all of you. Thank you for